What is everybody? Welcome to this Trainwreck Sports Podcast, where we are not here to play school. We're here to talk college football. Jake Micah, as always, joined by my brother Alex Micah.
Never here to play school.
Never here to play school. We're not playing around here.
No.
We're presented by Outlet Liquor, your place to buy a case any day of the week.
Yeah.
As football is happening, what is it, Mo? 50-something straight days
We
now?
we are into the 55 straight days now of football.
55 straight days. We're getting Maction, we're getting Sun Belt days, we're getting Conference USA, we're getting NFL football, but we have what is one of the biggest Saturdays in a long time to talk about here. I mean, we've been talking about this Saturday since the schedule dropped, basically.
I would say since the schedule dropped, everyone was like, this is the day. It's gonna be awesome.
So the way we're gonna do this, we're gonna get to our big games here. There's 4 big games we're gonna talk about. And we're going to start in the Big Ten, finish in the SEC. All right, folks, that's where we're going to go. So we're starting in the Big Ten with the game of the day, game of the week, College Game Day in Eugene, Ohio State at Oregon, 7:30 p.m. on NBC. Number 2, Ohio State, 3-point favorites over the Ducks. Just the type of matchup this is like when, which people are complaining about realignment and everything. This is the matchup you look at why it's worth it. Like to get a game like this on a random Saturday in October, Ohio State and Oregon, it's going to be awesome. I can't wait to see the atmosphere at Autzen Stadium. Going to be great. How do you feel about this going into it?
I completely agree. It's going to be a great time. This is like you got these matchups between some of these Big Ten teams, the old Big Ten and the new Big Ten, because like the Rose Bowl. And so this was like Ohio State, Oregon would have been a Rose Bowl game for some past years. And then we had it a few years ago, a game that you were at where Oregon came to Columbus and won. That was Big Noon Kickoff, right?
Yes.
Yeah. But now it's just like this is going to be a yearly game, or at least like, maybe like every other year that they're going to get to play each other. And it's a program in Ohio State that's been dominant for, 60 years. Either one of the top teams or the top team in the country, and Oregon team that has been really good but has never won a national championship. And now I think in the Big Ten has that much more of a stake that they can get, because the Pac-12, let's face it, was never really respected as one of those teams. But if Oregon does their job at home and beats Ohio State, they have a case of being the number 1 team in the country after this week.
Oh, definitely. Do you think we'll get to the number 1 team in the country later on? I think no matter who wins this game goes to number 1. The way that they've been doing it.
It's possible. The thing is like that we saw this happen just these past 2 weeks, and I mean games that we didn't necessarily talk. We talked about Alabama and Georgia, and Alabama came in, and I mean that game ended up being really close, but Alabama was beating the hell out of them for most of it. Jumped to number 1, and then what happened last week when they jumped to number 1? They lost to Vanderbilt.
Yep.
So.
True.
Is it
maybe the voters hold off on it? Yeah.
Yeah, because if like you said, we'll get to the number 1 team. If that number 1 team just takes care of business this weekend, why would you move them again? Like, and keep on disrespecting them, honestly. But we'll stick to this game right now.
Yeah. Well, first we got to figure out who's going to win this game. So, what do you think is going to go on in this game? What's the story of these 2 teams this season?
Well, the story of these 2 teams is that Oregon's only ever beaten Ohio State 1 time, and it was that game that you went to in Columbus.
Yeah,
3 years ago.
I've never seen a crowd sadder after a week 2 football game than I did in Columbus, Ohio that day.
So it's interesting. Ohio State 9-1 all time against Oregon, dating back to I think it's like the 20s is the amount of times that they played each other. And Oregon though historically is great at home when they host College Game Day. They are 7-3 at home for game day. I mean I believe they're like 11 and like 6 overall whenever they're game day. So nighttime in Autzen, we always talk about how crazy shit gets when you're in Oregon at night, whether it's Eugene or whether it's Corvallis. I mean, when was the last time Ohio State played in this like hostile of a road environment? Besides like obviously like Penn State for the whiteout, but those last couple times they played Penn State, that's been Big Noon. It hasn't been the nighttime environment and coming in this hostile place. And I mean, I don't know how much you trust quarterback Will Howard. I don't really. I don't think he's that good of a quarterback. I think he's fine. He was okay at Kansas State and he had a couple decent moments. But I don't know. Do you trust quarterback in Dylan Gabriel over Will Howard? Both of them I don't think are very good. I kind of want to lean Oregon, honestly, in this game.
Well, the quarterback discussion of it all, I'm in the same place. I don't really trust either of these guys, honestly.
No.
I think it's going to be who makes the least mistakes. I'm not sure who that quarterback's going to be. I'm also leaning Oregon because of the being at home. We haven't seen this Ohio State team tested this year. This is by far I mean, maybe not. It depends. We're going to talk about Penn State in a couple minutes. Maybe that's the toughest game for Ohio State this year. These three teams, I feel like, are a lot closer than people are, discussing them as. And whoever comes out of this game is going to be talked about as the Big Ten favorite and everything else, and deservedly so. But I don't know. I haven't been impressed, like blown away by Oregon this year. And the Boise State win is looking a lot better as we go week by week and see Ashton Gianti just destroy college football teams and rip their souls out.
Is the clear Heisman favorite now? Yeah,
easily. I mean, if he keeps this up and doesn't win it, we've lost the plot or something. But so Oregon has the best win out of these teams by far, but it was a really good win at home over a good Iowa team, a team that's not going to blow anybody away, but it's not a bad team last week by Ohio State. To see them put those points up 35 against a good defense is impressive. And we know the talent they have. They've got two running backs who could start on almost any team in this country.
Yeah,
Trayvon Henderson and Quinshon Judkins. They have a wide receiver who, as you put here, best wide receiver not named Ryan Williams, Jeremiah Smith. He's like a prodigy. And Ryan Williams is just like the most athletically gifted wide receiver I think I've ever seen. Jeremiah Smith might be – he's pretty damn close, though. Like, this guy is ready to have a breakout game on a national scale, and we're going to learn about him as a gamer in this too. Like, is he ready for a big-time moment in his freshman year? Is he going to have a big game, or is he going to be a guy that they take away and he isn't able to get through that? So the Buckeyes' weapons we know about, but there's still a lot of questions from Smith. And as you mentioned with Howard, this is the biggest game he's ever played in. I mean, he had some big games in his career, but easily the biggest game he's ever played in, being Ohio State at Oregon. Like,
I'd say like outside of this, his biggest game would be like the Big 12 championship when they beat TCU a few years ago.
Yeah, that's true.
It knocked off the team that eventually goes to the playoff. But I mean, I don't know. It's very.
But that's still not in. That's at Jerry World too.
It's neutral site. Yeah. And I mean, like obviously, I put in the document. He's like surrounded by the most talent that like any quarterback, honestly, in college football. Being on that Ohio State team is probably the most talented team you're ever going to play on, outside of if you go to the NFL and you're on like a star-studded team. Yeah. Having Mike Ibuka, who is probably a first-round wide receiver, as your second option because Jeremiah Smith is so good, and having probably the way running backs are looking in the league right now, probably like 2 first-round running backs who might get drafted. I mean, and like Quinshon, I think for sure is a first-round pick, no matter what. I think he could have been a first-round pick last year if he could have came out.
Well, Gianti's going to be Gianti might be top 5 pick.
But there could be like, I mean, I don't want to. A couple years ago, we saw 2 running backs go in the first round. We've seen it a couple times.
Oh, we're seeing it.
We could be 3 running backs that go in the first round this year. And I think Quinshon Judkins and Ashton Gianti, who is the Heisman favorite, those are both guys. And then on the defensive side of the ball, Ohio State is just so talented. And I didn't realize they were first in points allowed. It's less than a touchdown right now. I mean, they are just decimating teams. Also, I mean, you got to look at the competition. And I don't know. I don't want to give too much like credit to an Iowa team that's an unranked Iowa team who never has a good offense. And it wasn't at Iowa, so it's not a tough environment to play in. So we don't know about Ohio State that much, really. We've seen them. This is what they do every year. They come in and they beat up on all these bad teams. That's what they should be doing.
Yeah.
But I don't know. That's why I'm like with Oregon, they haven't like had like won these crazy big games either, like against ranked opponents or anything like that. But at least they've gone up against some tougher, like stiffer competition that we can look at. Like Boise State is a good team. And Oregon State, who maybe wasn't the best team, but at least that's already a rivalry game that they played and got out of the way. So and I trust Dylan Gabriel, the guy who came into last year when he was playing for Oklahoma at Red River, and came in and tore up a really good Texas team that made it to the playoff, and took complete control of that game in the fourth quarter and led that game-winning drive. So I mean,
home is the major thing for Gabriel too. I mean, that's
Yeah.
going to be huge because, like you said, that you did that in that game, neutral site. I would feel a lot worse about Oregon if this was at Ohio State. I think that line is about right for where it should be here. But if it was at OSU, I wouldn't be surprised if it was like a 10-point line, honestly, with the Buckeyes. So that's where we're at. Will Howard last year did play at Texas, at Missouri. Two close 3-point losses they had. But obviously the team played well both those games to only be 3-point games. The Missouri one was earlier in the season. They were actually the ranked team, and Missouri was unranked. Obviously, we saw how the season bore out. That's still a pretty good loss by the end of it, going into a hostile game.
That game is a lot. That game I remember is a loss by a field goal. The dude hit like a 61-yard field goal or something like that.
Yeah, it was something nuts like that. It was Harrison Mevis 61-yarder.
Yeah, I was right on with the money with the yards.
Right on it. Will Howard was 25 of 39 in that game for 270, 3 tutties and a pick, so not bad at all. And then at Texas, I remember this Texas game, very stressful affair. Howard played pretty well in that one too. 26 of 41, 327, 4 touchdowns and a pick. So he's performed in these, high pressure environments at least last year. 2 games where the team didn't get it done. It was close, which could be telling for this game, but he did his part besides the pick on each side. But what can you do about that? And as you mentioned, Gabriel, we know that he can show up in big games. We just don't think his ceiling is as high as other people are. I feel like that's where we're at.
No, I don't think either.
I feel like I don't think either of these
Oregon ceilings are high. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Howard's ceiling is definitely. I don't think Howard's ceiling is even as high as Gabriel, but he just has more talent, and so that's the trade-off we get. So all right, we got to get to some other games here, though. What are we predicting for this one?
I think it'll be close. I mean, obviously, it's just me just being a hater, I guess, picking against Ohio State. But I don't know. I'll go. I don't think it's going to be too high scoring. I'll go like 27-21 Oregon.
I'm also going Oregon 31-28.
All right.
So we're both on the Ducks, both to cover, both to win. We're not going to feel good about any pick with this game. This is a classic. Should be a classic matchup.
It should be.
Another big matchup where you're thankful for realignment. The Penn State Nittany Lions, 5.5-point favorites at USC. This would have been a top 10 matchup this week, but USC going down at Minnesota last week. Crazy to see that. I mean, it was crazy to see USC and Minnesota playing each other. That was like a beautiful thing, but also just this jarring thing. And then to see them lose that game, they obviously struggled with Michigan on the road, but you're like, all right, Michigan's at home. Like maybe they're a good team. Looks like USC has some warts, and looks like Vegas thinks so too. Penn State goes all the way up to number 4 this week after all the losses in the top 10 last week. You got to run down last week too. Bama losing to Vandy, most shocking upset of the year by far. Tennessee losing to Arkansas, not as shocking, but still a pretty shocking upset there. Michigan going down, USC going down. Just a tough week. Miami getting lucky as they possibly could be, almost going down, which we could have gotten the full chaos. Some questionable calls at the end.
And that's why Miami didn't jump up ahead of any of these teams. The AP is like, there's 2 close calls in a row for Miami. We're not putting them as a top 5 team right now.
But the Nittany Lions have handled their business. They had one real scare this year, and that's about it, was that game against Bowling Green, which you can look at as a letdown game a little bit, I think, from the week 1 big win over West Virginia on the road. They come in thinking they're hot stuff, have some trouble with Bowling Green, still get it done. Here they are, number 4, though, one of the best defenses in the country, one of the best rushing attacks in the country, facing obviously a high-powered, should be a high-powered USC offense, but the last couple of weeks has not been put up the points in that way. So how do you feel about this game, aside from any Penn State homerism you got?
I think Penn State, it's going to come down to the trenches. Though. Penn State has a better offensive line, and they have a better defensive line. If they can just get to Miller Moss and kind of shut him down, I mean that's all they got to really focus on. They've been pretty good against the run this year, and they got to be good against the run. Woody Marks, the running back for USC, is averaging 5.8 yards a carry, which Singleton is doing that too. But I mean they're both cruising, and then they have a freshman who's only got 27 carries, but he's getting almost 8 yards a carry. So man. I mean you got to watch out for just a change of pace, and you be prepared. I mean, I don't know. Penn State's offensive line has been played well. They haven't really like caused too many hiccups. And USC's defense this last 3 years since Lincoln Riley's been there, right? 3 years he's been there now. That's kind of been the whole story, is that the defense hasn't ever really looked that good, and they let up a decent amount of yards on the ground. They let up, like I was looking at earlier, like 6 explosive plays of over 40 yards on the ground, and that's what Nick Singleton's been living and dying by this year, is just those explosive run plays. So, I mean, just looking at it, like looking at the two teams, I can understand why Penn State's favorited. My only concern is that these cross-country road trips that have been going on for the new Big Ten teams and the old Big Ten teams, only one team has won going across the country. They're 1-8 so far. So that doesn't bode well for Penn State. I know they're flying out Thursday, James Franklin said.
Okay.
So they get an extra day to acclimate. So we'll see how that goes. But
yeah, that's a thing to touch on too with the Ohio State Oregon game. Obviously, good to mention that going cross country for the Buckeyes. Yeah, it's been tough for the new teams in the Big Ten. I think that there's a stat that includes the ACC teams too, where it hasn't really gone well for the cross country ACC games. So it's been tough with that, with the realignment and everything. But I don't think this USC team has it in the trench. You brought up the trenches. I think this game is simple. I think Penn State dominates them in the trenches and wins this game by like 2 touchdowns. I don't think USC can keep up with them in that regard. I think Penn State has one of the best secondaries, just one of the best defenses in general, the best fronts, but the secondary is going to make plays. They're going to be sticky on those receivers. It's going to be hard for USC to move the ball. And I just think the rushing attack, as you have here, one of the worst rush defenses in the country USC has, and Penn State has one of the best rushing attacks in the country. I think they're just going to lean on that and be able to control this game. And I think it's going to be like, I don't want to say 31 again, but I'm thinking 31-17, 34-20, something around there. Penn State takes this game.
I'd be happy with that. I'll say 35-21. That was what the score was that. Last time Penn State came out west was the Rose Bowl. They won 35-21. So I'll say that 35-21.
That's your revenge. Get the same score back.
Well, yeah, get the revenge. Yeah, they won that game against Utah, but yeah, get the revenge for the 2017 Rose Bowl. Yeah, that's the thing. USC has won the last 3 matchups against Penn State. The last time they played each other was that, which is crazy to think about, 7 years ago. The last time they played each other. But USC's gotten the edge the last 3 times, so it'll be interesting.
It will be. Saturday night, ABC, Death Valley. This is what ABC signed up for, is this kind of Saturday, right? With the SEC. And we don't start with this, but we finish with this because you got to go to Death Valley at night. Ole Miss, -3.5 at LSU. And what kind of feels like could be a playoff elimination game, honestly. Like if one of these teams slip up here, it's going to be hard to see them go undefeated the rest of the year. It would be, I mean, not hard to see it, but with 2 losses, each of them with 2 losses, going to be a hard case in this SEC.
Yeah.
So it kind of feels like the first elimination, kind of playoff game we've had, because it was weird. Like Alabama losing to Vandy last week could have been a death knell in the bowl playoff. This year, they're probably going to be okay. I mean, and they're only dropped down to 7, so you're allowed a loss like that. I don't really mind that. I think you should be it's really hard to go undefeated, and I think a good team is at 10-2 still deserves a shut at a national championship, because those teams could still be the best teams in the country. Circumstances changes, whatever. But it feels like this is the point where these 2 teams, it's nut up or shut up time, and if they lose, you're really battling uphill to make a play.
Right, and I mean with the new
great position in the SEC.
Yeah, especially with the new way that the SEC is structured, where there's no more divisions and it's just the overall conference record. I mean, you have 2 conference losses. I mean, that's hard to come back from. Like, even honestly, if one of these teams, now, because really everybody in the SEC has a loss besides Texas right now. Really, any of these teams, if say Ole Miss goes to the end and they're going up against another team, that second SEC loss in the SEC championship game, that might still knock them out from going. Or if LSU does it. I guess actually LSU's loss isn't SEC, So I guess
Yeah.
that's what they have going for them. That's it's USC. So they have that going for them right now.
But let's look at the
It's
schedules the rest
interesting.
of the way for both of them. They have each other, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
LSU at Arkansas, which we saw was if Arkansas could beat Tennessee at home, they can beat this LSU team at home. Like,
Yeah.
I'm fair to say that.
Yeah.
At A&M, that's a tough matchup.
Looking great. Yeah, looking great.
Hosting Bama, so they're at home, but they could lose to Bama. Then it's at Florida, home to Vandy. I think they handle both those games, but Vandy we know is going to be frisky. And then they end with Oklahoma. And this Oklahoma team's still a pretty big unknown in this year. We'll find out a lot about them Saturday too. But that's still 3 top 20 games that they have left on their schedule. Ole Miss this week, they get a bye after LSU. Then they host Oklahoma. Then they go to Arkansas. Then they host Georgia. So this is like they're having Alabama and Georgia on each of their schedules too the rest of the way makes this game feel even bigger than it is.
Ole Miss doesn't play Bama this year?
They do not.
Interesting. Wasn't a protected rivalry, I guess, huh? That's interesting.
No, I probably I would imagine that LSU and Mississippi State took the precedent for Ole Miss instead of Bama.
That would make sense.
That would make sense. And then LSU, I think, asked for Bama. I think
Bama,
that's always the first Saturday in November is what that is called now. Evidently.
Yeah, Bama and Arkansas. Arkansas is a battle for the boot.
Yes.
They have that trophy. So I mean that makes sense why they would still play
Yeah, it's
them.
weird that they didn't do. I guess Arkansas now plays Missouri at the end of the year every year. So that's the end of the season. Because I was like, why don't you just do LSU and Arkansas and Oklahoma and Missouri? Because those are the more classic rivalries. But instead they're doing LSU, Oklahoma, and then Arkansas, Missouri. So I don't know. It doesn't make much sense to me.
Let's see.
But LSU, Oklahoma is there is some precedent for that because LSU was playing A&M at the end of the season basically every year when they brought to the SEC.
They did, but now that's Texas. Now
going to play. Yeah,
Texas. Yeah.
So Oklahoma, LSU, we can start a little rivalry with those two. Why not?
Arkansas, Missouri, the battle line rivalry. So
yep.
They've played each other 15 times. That's not really that.
It's basically started. That rivalry basically started when Mizzou came to the SEC.
Yeah.
All right, so we haven't talked a lot about the on the field with this game.
What's it called? What's the rivalry? I wrote it in, but I hope you didn't see it.
I did see it. Sorry, Magnolia Bowl. I did know that.
Magnolia Bowl.
Great.
What's the trophy?
I don't know.
It's literally just the Magnolia Bowl trophy.
Oh, okay. So Ole Miss lost to Kentucky, as you mentioned. LSU lost to SC to start the year. I don't know. Neither. If I had to pick a team that just going into it that I feel better about, I feel better about Ole Miss, and it might just be because I don't like Brian Kelly and don't think.
I mean, and you like Lane Kiffin because I like Lane Kiffin, even though they beat Penn State last year, but. I mean, I would look at it. It always comes down to the quarterback. I think Jackson Dart's a better quarterback than Garrett Nussmeier.
Is he good enough to win in Death Valley, though? That's the question.
I mean, I think it's plausible. That team is just like so loaded with talent, and him having Trey Harris, his wide receiver, who is leading the nation in yards.
That's crazy, man.
I mean, we saw wide receivers do some special stuff against LSU this year with USC. I mean, Zachariah Branch and Miller Moss, and I would say obviously that Ole Miss is better at those two positions, quarterback and wide receivers against LSU. Obviously, that was a neutral site game, so like you said, bring it up at home. I think so. I think I mean, if anyone's primed for a moment, it's this Ole Miss team who last year kind of showed, hey, we can be a contender in the SEC. And then coming into the season.
Last year, their two losses in the regular season at Alabama, which was 24-10, so the offense got shut down. They did beat LSU last year, 55-49. That was at home, though. And then that Georgia game, they just got blown out. I think it was 55-17 or 52-7, something like that. So that's what worries me about Ole Miss going on the road, at least.
Well, I mean, it all depends on, and I looked at this. I mean, that Ole Miss coming into this year, these first 3 weeks, they were like, oh my God, they have the historic offense. They're the best team in the world. They're putting up all these crazy numbers. And then they started SEC competition and they lost. And then last week they got a win over who did they play last week? I don't even remember.
They beat South Carolina.
South Carolina 27-3. But they're not. I mean, I don't know. They're not putting up a lot of points in this SEC play at all. But neither is really as LSU.
Yeah. Well,
So-
LSU. This is only their second SEC matchup of the year. They
and they had their game against South Carolina. Yeah.
Yeah, which they didn't look amazing in. They kind of got bailed out in that game too. So I think it's interesting because Nussmeier's playing well, and maybe this is the moment for Nussmeier, right? Where he kind of shows that he's a real deal quarterback, can win this game at home and lead a team into the heart of the SEC schedule with real national title contention. But we've talked about this Ole Miss team. Like, this is the year where they can make the playoff and make a run. I think I'm leaning with the Rebels here. I think I'm going Ole Miss 26, LSU 24.
You said 26-24?
Yes.
That's a close score. I was looking quick. I wanted to see where LSU ranked for points per game. They're pretty down there, honestly. They're not looking too hot.
No.
21 points a game. Honestly, I'm gonna pick, like, we could say, oh, this defense maybe they'll struggle against each other. I think this game's gonna be high scoring. Honestly, I feel like it might get a little sloppy at times too. Nussmeier threw would have been a pick six, but got called back because he's a little baby. I guess can't take a hit. I'm gonna go. It's gonna be like 45-42. I think it's gonna be high scoring. I think Ole Miss is gonna win. They're not gonna cover because it's 3.5. But I think it's gonna be high scoring.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're both.
We gotta get one of these games is gonna be high scoring. Like when we both predicted Georgia Alabama, we said, oh, it's gonna be low scoring, it's gonna be sloppy, whatever, and we were way off. So I'm going high scoring with this one.
With that.
And you know what? Who doesn't like seeing a lot of points scored?
I think this is the high scoring one.
Oh. Red
River Shootout.
Now, what do you think of this spread?
Makes sense.
I don't know.
You're just scared by ghosts of Oklahoma past, and I understand. But this team is so much better than Oklahoma, Texas is because Oklahoma's offense is anemic. Like, Oklahoma's offense is a joke. But somehow, some way in these games, we've said that about Oklahoma, last year. We were like, I don't know about this offense. And they turned up. And the defense played well. And that's the thing, is I feel like it's strength or strength in this game, where it's Texas's high-powered offense and Quinn Ewers coming back, hopefully healthy, versus a Brent Venables defense who has been pretty damn good all year. And you add Red River in, you add some trick plays from Oklahoma, something like that. Maybe it gets close. It just feels like the talent gap, though, between these two teams this year is particularly pronounced.
I mean, it definitely is. You say about Quinn Ewers being healthy. I think he's been healthy the whole time. I think that injury's fake.
Maybe.
It's too much of a coincidence to get Arch his starts. That's all my belief in the matter is. You get him these two games, so he has experience. He's not going in dry. He gets an SEC game. He gets his first career start, the anniversary of when Archie Manning got his first career start in college football.
That one's a little weird, I will admit.
And then the next week, they play Mississippi State. Archie and Eli, who did they play 4 times in their college careers? Because they went to Ole Miss, was Mississippi State. And Peyton got to play Mississippi State, too, at Tennessee. So you just get the Manning family beaten up in Mississippi State. And, I just think it's too much coincidence. Whatever.
It's fair. I can't argue.
It is. The quarterback situation is way better for Texas, obviously. Quinn is playing great and was a Heisman contender. I wouldn't say favorite before he went down. And then still some lists I see him as like the 10th guy. And even though he hasn't played the last, he hasn't played the last like 10 quarters of football even. And Arch is showing what he was worth. He was a 5-star quarterback, and he's played good. Still young, obviously, has a lot of growing to do. But that situation is much better in Oklahoma, who has recently benched Jackson Arnold because he wasn't what they thought he was going to be. not this hero, and they put in Michael Hawkins Jr., who he's got more zip than Jackson Arnold, I would say. That's his thing, but he's a true freshman. So it's up in the air. I don't know who is starting. When I was looking at this, I didn't see who was going to be starting. Are you going to go with a guy who has a little bit more game experience in Jackson Arnold, or are you going to go with the true freshman against a really good Texas defense that's kind of like been built the last few years in recruiting and by a good defensive coordinator in Pete Kwiatkowski to compete in the SEC? We saw this like 3 years ago, that first Alabama-Texas game where they kind of held Alabama, they shut them down, and people were like, okay, Texas is ready for the SEC. They built this defense. It's not the Big 12 defense we've seen in the past that can't stop anything. So I just think 14.5 is big for a rivalry game of this level where we honestly don't know what could happen. It could go either way. So I just thought the spread of 14.5 was too high. I do think Texas is going to win.
It is a jarring spread to see. But Texas is just like you've said it all year. They're clearly the best team in the country.
I do. I've thought that, yeah.
And I think it's very, very easy to tell. Even we have the game that we talked about at the beginning of this with number 2 and number 3. Neither of those teams feel as complete as Texas does. Neither of them. And we haven't seen a lot. We're going to learn a lot about the Buckeyes. If the Buckeyes go and dominate Oregon and they're just like they win by 2 touchdowns, even if they win by like 10 points or something on the road, then I will start to entertain the conversation that it's Texas and Ohio State and maybe everybody else. But Texas right now just looks like a force. They're number 7 in points for in the country. They're 2 in points again. They've let up 7 points per game right now. Like this defense is for real. The fact that we don't know who the Oklahoma quarterback is going to be is all that we really should need to know. That's the situation for Oklahoma's offense this year. It's been a mess. And if it gets out to Texas gets out to a 10-0 lead, a 14-0 lead, I don't know how Oklahoma fires back in this game unless it just turns into utter Red River chaos, which it always can. Always a possibility at any time in this game it turns into chaos. Mm-hmm. But I feel like it's more chaos of like, oh shit, Texas is up 35-3 at halftime or something like that. Kind of chaos is more likely to me than a close game.
I mean, yeah. It would. I mean, I'd prefer that. You know, it makes for an easier watch. What's going on in this game? It's the thing that's going to come down to is Quinn just has to. He just has to, calm down and watch the turnovers because last year he had 2 picks and one of those picks was on the opening drive of the game.
Yep.
And then Texas was kind of trailing that whole game from that point on. They had that field goal like right towards the end of the game, and then Dillon Gabriel marched down the field. Oklahoma doesn't have a guy like Dillon Gabriel who can march down the field for them this year. Not at all. Honestly, all their games were close. I mean, obviously they had that loss to Tennessee, and that was at home. And their defense did decent to stifle Nico and that high-powered Heupel offense. But Tulane, they only won by like a touchdown. Yep. Last week they beat Auburn. I think it was 24-10.
It was a close game, yeah. In Auburn, but
in Auburn too. So I'm nothing crazy. Like they're technically the home team this game, but that doesn't matter because if you ever seen an aerial shot of the Cotton Bowl for Red River, it's half burnt orange and it's half, I don't know, what is it? What is Oklahoma?
Crimson.
Crimson?
I think it's also crimson.
They're crimson and Alabama's crimson? I don't know.
Yes.
But either way, we were talking about this last week, that Arkansas, Oklahoma, and Alabama all have 2 similar of colors.
Crimson and cream are their colors. That's
crimson and cream. Well, they do have that cream jersey. That's okay. Yeah.
And Alabama's also crimson, obviously. So
yeah. Is Arkansas crimson?
Let's see. Probably not. I bet you it's like maroon.
That's maroon.
Bet you theirs is something a little different. Oh, well, it doesn't pop up automatically for me. Hold on. I got to do some actual searching here. Cardinal red. That's what Arkansas calls their red.
Right. Either way, we're getting into the colors right now. It's just, I've said all year that I thought Texas should have been the number 1 team in the country coming into the season. They got to that number 1 spot after beating Michigan, got knocked down for some inexplicable reason, and now is back up to being number 1. And I don't know. I just feel like the AP is going to be like, if Texas comes out and they win by this spread, if they win by 14 points or win by 21 points over a ranked Oklahoma team at a neutral site, then I don't know how you could be like, no, we're not going to have you at 1 anymore. It's just, I mean,
So what do you think is going to happen?
I think Texas is going to win. I don't think they're going to win by 2 touchdowns. I think it's going to be like a 10. I'll say a 10-point game. I could see them doing like 30. I'll say 31-21.
Okay.
I'll say 31-21. Bert Auburn's got to get a field goal in there. Got to see his
That's
picture.
fair. I'm going Texas 45, Oklahoma 24. I think it's going to be an up-tempo game at Texas's pace, which allows Oklahoma to get more on the board, but it's Texas dominating this whole time. That's I think it's going to be like 28-3 at halftime or something. Truly. 28-10.
Well, if it's 28-3 at halftime, then that's a tough second half for Texas. They let up 21 points.
2 touchdowns, garbage time touchdown in there. It is what it is. I think Texas is clearly the better team than this Oklahoma team, and we're not going to learn a lot about Texas until next week when they play the Georgia Bulldogs at home.
Yes.
Then we'll
at home. Lucky for Texas. Yes. Honestly,
very lucky. But that's going to be some theater. If these might just all be the appetizers for Texas and Georgia next Saturday. Honestly,
it's highly possible. Could
just be that. But all right. That's it. Go about your Saturday. Go to Outlet Liquor, your place to buy a case. For my brother, Alex Micah, this is Jake Micah sending you off to this week in college football action, and we will be back next week to break it all